I'm Jenna Miscavige. I was born and raised in Scientology. I left when I was 21 years old and wrote a book about it. My uncle, David Miscavige, is the leader of Scientology, and this is my YouTube channel. Hey you guys, I hope you all had a beautiful Christmas. Today's video is going to be a little bit different. I'm going to be answering some questions for Ryder, who is the son of one of my listeners, and he's doing a school project about Scientology. And so he sent me a bunch of questions and I wanted to answer them. And his questions were actually really good. They got me to think, and I also thought it might be fun since a lot of my listeners have been in high control groups in the past, or have had other similar cult-like experiences. Maybe if you guys wanted to answer the questions for yourself in the comments as well. And even just sometimes I'm going to forget things, or just to see your guys' take on it as well. I think it would be helpful to me, to other people in the comments, and also helpful to Ryder, possibly. Okay, so here's Ryder's first question. Where do you believe the line stands between religion and cult? At what point does a religious group become a cult? And where would you say Scientology fits on the spectrum? So I would say that something can be both a religion and a cult. And so they're not actually like mutually exclusive. I think that regardless of what makes something a cult or what makes it a religion, what really matters is if it's harming you in some way. So even a religion could be harming you, even if it's not necessarily a cult. And so I think that the fact that it does you harm is the most important aspect of this. But I think that one of the biggest hallmarks of a cult is that there are very high punishments or life-altering punishments or huge consequences for either leaving or disobeying or speaking out against it in some way. Where, like, just say, for example, if you just want to leave a job that you don't like, yeah, maybe some people might not like you, or maybe you won't be getting the same pay, but it's not life-altering. It's not endangering your salvation, or it's not a threat to you losing your whole family or your whole support system. So I think that's a really big thing that makes something a cult. I think it's probably the biggest thing. I think another one is that the group, the cult, enforces really strict control on its members, whether it's through getting them to report on each other, whether it's through teaching them that if they learn certain information or if they tell certain information, they will die or harm will come to them, or they'll be hurting other people. I think that when the group exerts control over its members' thoughts to the degree that they think that they have to work 14-hour days with no time off, with little pay, and that they have to harm themselves, not eat well, not get enough sleep, and that's part of the deal, where their controlling activities are actually bringing physical unhealthiness to the person. I think that that's a big hallmark of a cult. Or if the group is telling you shouldn't get certain medical care that you need in order to survive, or even mental health care that you need in order to survive, in order to be healthy. Or when they influence members to do things that aren't really actually beneficial to them. Even just like a small example of this would be Tom Cruise going on TV and acting like a maniac about Scientology. That's not something that actually helped his career. It helped Scientology, I guess. It probably actually just made Scientology look more crazy. But it's just another example of something where he felt like he had to do that in order to prove his loyalty or in order to recruit new members, and it was really harmful to him in the end. Another big thing to me personally was that in cults, it feels like they make people forget their own identity. They essentially lose their identity, where everyone in the group has the same purpose, they're wearing the same thing, they're only supposed to think certain thoughts, and so you just lose your individuality and what it is about you that makes you different from other people. In many cases, if you grow up in a cult-like environment, you're not even exposed to things that would be of interest to you, including like being deprived of education. You don't know your opportunities. You don't know what else is out there. And so you just kind of can become a sort of like clone of everybody else in the group and whatever they want you to be. Another hallmark of a cult, I feel, is that the group sort of systematically cuts off access to outside information that would say anything against its beliefs or activities or any naysayers. And it's not just that they recommend you not reading certain things, is that they actually restrict access to this. For example, in Scientology, they have software that they put on every Scientologist's home computer that they require them to put on there that block keywords or anti-Scientology sites. And, you know, it's one thing to answer questions as they come up, but it's a whole other thing to deny access to any other point of view. And the way that Scientology systematizes this is it basically teaches you from a really young age that anyone who says anything bad about Scientology is the devil, and they're cut off from the group and they're not allowed to communicate to its members. So it's actually part of their policies to make it so you can never hear a stray word about Scientology. You can never even consider the things that people are saying about it. They also do things like, when I was in Scientology's most dedicated group called the Sea Organization, they checked all of our mail. Our mail came into the church and it would be opened by the people who were responsible for policing us and making sure that we were ethical. So whenever we got a letter from somebody maybe who wasn't in Scientology, or even people who were in Scientology, even people who were in the Sea Org, the letter was opened and read. Even when I got a letter from my own parents who were part of Scientology's most elite group, the letter was opened and read to make sure that it didn't say anything bad about it. And there was about a year of my life when I was there where all of my letters were confiscated. So many of my friends who were in Scientology wrote me letters and I never even saw them. And I heard later that it was because they had said something bad about their boss and they had gotten in trouble. So it's almost like your communication is restricted, and anything bad you might say from one person to another is cut off and you're punished for it. And that creates a insulated environment and an echo chamber where you can never hear a sideways word about it. Another thing, just to give an example of this, is that when I worked in Scientology's most dedicated group called the Sea Org, you were only allowed to have access to the internet if you needed it for your job. So in my case, at the time, my job was designing Scientology churches. Well, in order to have access to the internet, in order to find furniture or whatever, I had to get special clearance through Scientology's Office of Special Affairs. And so I had to prove that I was ethical, and only then could I have access to the internet, which was in a locked room. So I could only get this key after I had special approval. And again, the computer with the internet had the special software on it that blocked any Scientology sites. And I had to fill out a log when I came into the room and when I left and why I was in there, etc. Okay, so Ryder's next question is, what does a daily life of a Scientologist look like? Is every day an effort towards the bridge to total freedom through auditing and Scientology books? How might the church's bridge to total freedom be a scam or a false promise to parishioners? Okay, so this is a great question. And the answer is that different Scientologists' lives look different. There's Scientology's paying members who would just be like regular people who go to church, except I guess you don't pay to go to church. But they're allowed to have regular jobs, and they're allowed to have their own home, they're allowed to have a car, and they're allowed to have children. And those Scientologists are called public. But then there's Scientology's most dedicated members, called Sea Org members, who live communally. They sign 1 billion year contracts. They work 14-hour days. They get almost no time off. And so And so different members of Scientology have very different lives. So when I was a Sea Org member, I would wake up 8 o'clock, eat breakfast. Then there would be a big meeting with everybody. Everyone was organized into divisions. We would be like Unit 1 report, Unit 2 report. So it was very militarized. And then we would have a couple hours of studying about Scientology. And then we would have different jobs. And so my job was designing church buildings, but other people's jobs was to give Scientology counseling. And we would have several of these meetings throughout the day. We would work after dinner, and we would go home at about 11 p.m. or 12 p.m. And some days we would work all night, like depending on the evolution that was happening, or if something had to get done before a big Scientology event. We would work through the night, and we would sleep under our desks. And so that would be very different from somebody like Tom Cruise, who has his own house, who has a bunch of people who work for him. So there isn't just one uniform way that a day would be for a Scientologist. I hope that's a good answer. The second half of his question was, how might the church's bridge to total freedom be a scam or false promise to parishioners? I think one of the biggest aspects of this that's a scam is that Scientology gets you in through self-improvement things, like communication and how to better your marriage, but that's not really what Scientology is about. Those are sort of like self-help things that make Scientology look normal, when really the entire bridge, which is Scientology's roadmap for their counseling, where you start at the bottom and you move through each step to get to the top. Each step is progressively more weird, but you don't know that because you can never skip a step. So you never know how weird it's going to get until you're already there. So like at the bottom, they're talking about improving communication. At the top, as you get higher, they're literally talking about space aliens. But you're taught that if you skip a step, that you will become sick, and your mind will be destroyed, and so you never ever skip. So you really never know where you're headed. So by the time you get to this high level, you're already so invested. All of your friends are already Scientologists. You already potentially work for a Scientologist. And so it's hard to leave or to go back at that point. But you don't know it until you're already so far in. All right, and here's the last question. In what ways does the Church of Scientology manipulate, brainwash, and abuse parishioners for their benefit? In what ways might they fair game skeptics, critics, or former members? So I did go through a lot of the manipulation, getting members to report on each other, not telling them the real truth about Scientology until they're already so far invested. And I didn't go into detail about it, but basically Scientology services actually cost money for people. So you cannot get Scientology services unless you pay. And Scientology releases new book publications all the time, and they have several events throughout the year, which are just like big Scientology gatherings where everyone gets dressed up and they get addressed by members of Scientology management. And they ask people for more money, and they actually convince people to do things like mortgage their houses, max out all their credit cards in order to pay for these services. And they say that it's in the name of saving humanity. And yes, you'll have a little bit of debt, but it will be worth it because you'll be saving people. You'll be saving yourself. You're paying for your eternity. And that's obviously hugely detrimental, manipulative, and it's for Scientology's own benefit. They teach people that if a family member leaves Scientology or speaks out about Scientology, that they're basically the devil and a horrible person, and that they're hurting people and they're hurting man's only chance for survival and salvation. And so in this way, they manipulate people to cut off family members, which is hugely destructive and only benefits Scientology. It only keeps other people still in Scientology, paying them money, giving them their labor, their dedication, their praise, and it's really hurting both the person who left Scientology and the people who are still in to not be able to speak to their family members. He mentioned here Scientology fair gaming critics, and fair game is a term that Scientology uses to say that anybody who criticizes Scientology is fair game to attack or hurt or anything like that. And that's what Scientology does. When I left Scientology, they basically infiltrated my ex-husband's family. They were telling him horrible things about me. They were telling them that they had to disconnect from me and my ex-husband. They put pressure on us for years. They had private investigators following us, trying to get dirt on us, basically so that they could use it to blackmail us or use it to discredit us if anybody who was still in Scientology ever heard us saying something bad about Scientology. And this is something that they do with all critics of Scientology. They even have whole manuals and training routines that teach them how to do this, how to spread lies about people, how to get them fired from their jobs. They hand out flyers about people. They even inserted someone into our life who lived with us for a while, who was pretending to be our friend, who was just reporting back to Scientology about us. And at the time, this was because I was appearing on TV. I was speaking to media about the abuses of Scientology. And so they were just looking for anything they could use to discredit me, to say that I was a bad person, that I was secretly into these bad things. And thankfully, I was really boring. So that really wasn't a big deal to me, but it was scary. It was intimidating, especially since I'd grown up in Scientology my whole life. They also make whole websites dedicated to saying terrible things about people who have left Scientology. And many of the things are just outright made up. And some of the things are taken from the things that people confessed to while they were in Scientology. They do this especially to people who have spoken up about Scientology, who really have only just told their story of being disconnected from family members. They even do it to people who were in Scientology their whole lives and had dedicated their whole life to Scientology. And so when anyone Googles that person's name, if they apply for a job or if somebody makes a new friend, they have this nasty website where there's all these lies right there about them, basically discrediting them or saying that they're a terrible person thanks to Scientology. Or if somebody who knew them that is still in Scientology, like one of their friends, they Google them, they will see all this misinformation about them that's just saying what a horrible person they are, and it's all just made up lies. Okay, Ryder, I hope that answered your questions, and I'm so excited that you're doing this school project. And I really appreciate you caring about this, and I know many other people do. I feel like the more young people who learn about critical thinking or learn the warning signs of a dangerous cult, the more people we can avoid getting into that situation. So good job, buddy. And if you guys want to leave some sweet comments for him, encouraging him, that would be wonderful. All right, that's all I've got for today. I will see you guys again soon. Bye.